Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Alexander Carter was a name everyone knew. Heir to a global financial empire, he had it all: wealth, influence, good looks. Yet, despite the countless women who flocked to his feet, he remained single. Women came for his money, his name, his fame, but never for him. And deep down, Alexander was tired of these superficial relationships. He wanted something real, something that would awaken his heart, not his wallet. Emily Dawson, for her part, lived in a comfortable but cold marriage. Her husband, Ethan, was an ambitious businessman, always absorbed in his work and indifferent to his emotions. Emily had everything to appear happy: a sumptuous house, travel, jewelry, but she felt alone and invisible. Her dreams and desires were stifled by routine and social expectations. Fate brought them together at a charity gala. Emily, dressed in an elegant yet simple gown, exuded a natural aura that immediately caught Alexander's attention. He didn't know who she was, but he felt an instant connection, a depth in her gaze that few possess. To Emily, the man standing before her seemed unlike any she had ever met. There was no pretense in his smile, no superficial flattery. Alexander was truly listening, asking questions that touched her heart, not her appearance. She was surprised to find herself understood, experiencing emotions she thought were buried forever. Yet, an invisible barrier stood between them: Emily was married. Alexander knew that pursuing his feelings would be dangerous, immoral, and yet he couldn't deny the irresistible attraction growing within him. Every glance, every smile, every word exchanged widened the gap between reason and desire. That evening, beneath the dazzling lights of the gala, two lives unexpectedly intersected. Unbeknownst to each other, they would each change the other's life forever, unleashing a storm of passion, dilemmas, and impossible choices. The game of love had only just begun, and no one could foresee where it would lead them. The grand hall of the charity gala shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, and the murmur of elegantly dressed guests filled the room like a gentle melody. Alexander Carter stood near the buffet, observing the crowd with a mixture of weariness and curiosity. Every woman who approached seemed to be calculating how to charm the wealthy heir, and every superficial conversation left him more detached than ever. Then, his gaze met that of a woman in the middle of the room. Emily Dawson. She stood straight, but her expression betrayed a slight weariness, as if the world had ignored her too often. Her dress was simple but understatedly elegant, and something about her unassuming smile immediately caught Alexander's attention. He approached, intrigued. "Good evening, miss." Emily looked up, slightly surprised by the quiet confidence of the man in front of her. "Good evening," she replied, her voice soft but tinged with curiosity. "I don't believe we've met." Alexander Carter. He held out his hand, but his eyes never left it. "And you?" Emily Dawson. She squeezed her hand, feeling a strange warmth at the simple touch. "Pleased to meet you." The conversation that followed was anything but superficial. Alexander didn't talk about his businesses or his wealth, but about the real reason he was there: to support causes that could change lives. Emily, in turn, spoke about her own passions and frustrations, and for the first time in a long time, she felt someone truly listening to her. Each word they exchanged made their hearts beat faster, but a heavy silence brought them back to reality. Emily was married. And Alexander, despite his attraction, knew he would be crossing a line he couldn't cross, at least, not yet. As they parted ways to join other guests, an inexplicable shiver ran through Emily. She couldn't forget that look, that feeling of understanding and connection she had never experienced before. Meanwhile, Alexander found himself searching for her face in the crowd, unable to detach himself from this encounter that had just shattered his perfectly ordered world. This gala was supposed to be just another evening, but for Alexander and Emily, it was the beginning of an emotional storm that neither of them could have foreseen. Two lonely souls had just crossed paths, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the days following the gala, Alexander couldn't get Emily out of his mind. Every meeting, every date seemed bland compared to that moment when he'd seen her smile so genuinely. He found himself analyzing her every gesture, every word, as if trying to uncover the secrets hidden behind that captivating gaze. For Emily, daily life resumed its course, but something had changed. She found herself thinking about Alexander several times a day, smiling at memories that were nothing more than fleeting moments. Her guilt grew as her attraction to him became impossible to ignore. She loved her husband, or so she thought. But the warmth and attention Alexander had given her awakened a desire within her that she had never felt before. A few days later, Alexander took a bold step. He sent Emily an invitation to a private charity dinner, claiming he wanted to share some humanitarian projects that might interest her. Emily hesitated for a long time. Accepting meant putting herself out there, and her heart and her head were in conflict. Finally, her curiosity won out, and she accepted. That evening at the dinner, the atmosphere was intimate, far removed from the glitz and glamour of the gala. The soft candlelight illuminated the room, and Emily's subtle perfume seemed more captivating than ever. Alexander gently engaged her in conversation, asking about her dreams, passions, and regrets. There was no superficial flattery, just genuine curiosity that melted Emily's defenses. "You have a gift for understanding people," she murmured at one point, her gaze fixed on his. Alexander smiled, but there was a palpable tension in his expression. "I've never been interested in what people show on the outside. I'm interested in who they really are." Their hands accidentally brushed against each other on the table. A simple touch, but enough to send a shiver through Emily's body. She looked away, aware of the danger, while Alexander felt his heart clench. They were both conscious of the line they were about to cross. But fate seemed to both favor them and punish them. The connection between them grew stronger with every word, every smile, every shared laugh. They shared secrets, hopes, and sorrows, without ever touching the superficial aspects of each other's lives. And the closer they became emotionally, the harder the temptation became to resist. At the end of the evening, Alexander walked Emily back to her car. The silence between them was heavy with meaning. "Thank you for tonight," said Emily, her voice trembling but sincere. "I should be thanking you," Alexander replied. "You reminded me that some things, some people, are truly worth paying attention to." Emily got into her car, her heart pounding, aware that her life had just changed forever. And Alexander, alone on the sidewalk, realized that this attraction was no longer mere curiosity. He wanted Emily, despite all the barriers that separated them. Their story had barely begun, and already, every moment shared was a step towards a forbidden and dangerous passion. In the weeks that followed, Alexander and Emily could no longer ignore the tension between them. Even chance encounters became moments charged with emotion and restrained desire. Every smile, every word, every glance was a delicate dance between passion and morality. For Emily, guilt was beginning to weigh heavily. Her marriage to Ethan, though distant, was a source of security, a commitment she didn't want to break lightly. But Alexander represented everything she had never had: attention, understanding, warmth. Every thought of him was a cruel reminder of what she truly desired. For his part, Alexander struggled against his principles. He knew that falling in love with a married woman could cause irreversible damage. Yet, he couldn't deny the growing obsession that drove him to see her, to talk to her, to share moments of intimacy. His heart beat faster with each interaction, and he found himself dreaming of a future he knew was forbidden. One evening, Alexander invited Emily to a private art exhibition. She accepted, justifying her presence with her genuine interest in art, but her heart was pounding. In the silent room, in front of an abstract painting, Alexander gently approached her. "You see this painting?" he said, his voice low and warm. "I think some people only see the colors and shapes, but you see the story behind it." Emily looked at him, troubled. "Maybe, or maybe I just want to believe there's more than what we're shown." Their hands brushed against each other again, and this time neither pulled away. The contact was electric, and the outside world seemed to vanish around them. But danger was never far away. Emily knew her husband might notice this change, and Alexander knew society would condemn their affair if they were discovered. A few days later, Ethan, Emily's husband, began to show signs of suspicion. His questions, sudden calls, and calculated remarks put Emily in a constant state of stress. The fear of being discovered added further tension to each encounter with Ethan. For Alexander, the conflict was as much internal as external. He wanted to protect Emily, but he also wanted to be near her. Every choice seemed fraught with consequences: to distance himself to preserve his morality, or to approach her despite everything and risk everything. This tension became almost unbearable when Emily found herself alone with Alexander after dinner. The closeness, the warmth of his gaze, and the gentleness of his voice made every decision more difficult. "Alexander. I shouldn't," she murmured, her eyes filled with conflict. "I know," he replied softly. "But what I feel, I can't ignore it. And I don't want you to ignore what you feel either." This chapter of their lives suggested that their affair, though nascent and forbidden, could not be contained forever. The obstacles were numerous, but passion and desire only grew stronger, foreshadowing painful choices and unforeseen consequences. The bond between Alexander and Emily had now crossed an invisible threshold. Each encounter was a subtle dance between desire and restraint, and each knew that the moment of truth was inexorably approaching. One evening, after a particularly trying day for Emily, Alexander suggested they meet at a small, discreet café, away from prying eyes and the glitz of the outside world. Rain was falling gently outside, creating an intimate and protective atmosphere. Sitting opposite him, Emily felt her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she could no longer contain what she felt. Guilt consumed her, but the desire for truth and honesty was stronger. "Alexander," she began, her voice trembling. I can no longer ignore what I feel. I know it's wrong, I know I should be faithful to Ethan, but," she stopped, unable to finish. Alexander gently took her hand. "Emily, I understand. And I feel the same way. But I don't want to put you in an impossible situation." Silence fell, heavy but filled with tension. Then, Emily took a deep breath and whispered, "I love you." These words, simple yet heavy with meaning, shattered the last barrier. Alexander felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He knew their love was forbidden, but he could no longer deny the bond that united them. As they moved closer for an almost inevitable kiss, a ringing phone shattered the moment. Emily saw her husband's name appear on the screen. Her heart sank, and the reality of her situation hit her hard. "I have to go," she said, withdrawing quietly. "I need to think." Alexander watched her leave, helpless but understanding. He knew that this moment was not the end, but the beginning of a series of difficult choices. A few days later, Ethan, Emily's husband, discovered messages and clues that aroused his jealousy. He confronted Emily in a tense and accusatory scene, trying to manipulate her emotions to keep her under control. "Emily, what's going on?" he asked, his voice harsh. "Nothing," she replied hesitantly. I don't know." Alexander, though not directly involved in the confrontation, was ready to protect Emily from any injustice. But he knew the situation required patience and strategy. A forbidden love could not be revealed without consequences. This chapter marks a turning point. Feelings are now clear and irreversible, but obstacles become tangible. Emily's choice between the security of her marriage and the passion of her forbidden love with Alexander is approaching, and every decision could change their lives forever. The days following the confrontation with Ethan were intense for Emily. Every moment alone gave her time to reflect, to weigh her emotions and responsibilities. She loved Alexander, that was undeniable, but leaving her marriage meant facing the fear of judgment, social shame, and uncertainty. For Alexander, the waiting was just as difficult. He didn't want to rush Emily, but every minute away from her felt like torture. He understood that loving Emily meant respecting her choices and helping her find her own path, even if it meant temporarily disappearing from her life. One evening, under the starry sky of a rooftop illuminated by the city, they finally met. The air was thick with emotion, and each glance exchanged spoke louder than words. "Alexander," Emily began, her voice trembling but firm. "I've thought about everything, about my life, about what I truly want. And I know now that I can no longer live in a gilded cage, in a marriage that suffocates my heart." Alexander gently took her in his arms. "I will wait for you, no matter what you decide. But I am ready to share everything with you, if you choose to follow your heart." Emily took a deep breath and said, with newfound clarity, "I choose the life I want. I choose you, Alexander." Their embrace was both tender and powerful, as if it sealed the end of a long inner struggle and the beginning of a new chapter. The passion, understanding, and complicity they had felt from the first glance finally blossomed into freedom. As for Ethan, he understood that he had lost Emily not through manipulation or confrontation, but because he had ignored her needs and her heart for too long. The acceptance was bitter, but inevitable. A few weeks later, Alexander and Emily began their life together. They traveled, laughed, shared dreams, and built a love founded on sincerity and passion. Emily finally discovered she was free, happy, and fulfilled. Alexander, who had always rejected superficial relationships, understood that true love could blossom in the most unexpected situations. Their story, initially forbidden, had become a symbol of courage, choice, and transformation. Two hearts that had found each other despite obstacles and social rules, ready to build a future where every moment would be chosen by love and not by convenience. And as they watched the sunset together, Emily whispered, "I never believed in love at first sight, until I met you." Alexander smiled, placing his hand on hers. "And I never believed that true love could be this strong, until you." Their story seemed to be over, but in reality, it was only the beginning of a love that no barrier could ever stop.